Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are unpacking a seriously fascinating legal puzzle. We're looking at a Philippine Supreme Court decision, specifically GR number 210329. It's a gripping story about a maritime worker named Clarito Manzano, his employer, Philippine Transmarine Carriers, and a massive fight over disability benefits. Honestly, this case is an absolute masterclass in how rigid contracts, super precise definitions, and, well, literal ticking clocks can completely flip a legal outcome. If you've ever wondered how labor laws actually play out in the real world, when push comes to shove, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it.
So, to set the stage here, I want you to imagine getting hurt on the job. You push through the severe pain, you finish your tour of duty, and then you're told you don't qualify for compensation. Why? Simply because your employment contract technically expired right before you filed a formal medical claim. It sounds incredibly frustrating, right? Well, that brings us to the central question of this whole ordeal. Can you actually claim workplace disability if your contract is already over? That's exactly the dilemma the Supreme Court had to untangle.
Section 1. The Oilers Ordeal.
Back in February 2010, Clarito Manzano was hired as an oiler. Now, if you don't know, that is a back-breaking job. We're talking strenuous pushing, pulling, and lifting some really heavy gear down in a ship's engine room. And despite passing a rigorous pre-employment medical exam, his physical health basically broke down while he was out at sea. Just look at this sequence of events. In July 2010, he suffered initial knee pain after he allegedly slipped. By August, he was in a New Jersey hospital getting treated for a knee sprain. Fast forward to September, he reported getting nailed on the right shoulder by a heavy metal door. And by November, the pain was so bad he had to be treated in an Oman clinic for both shoulder and back issues. The documentary evidence of his physical decline was, frankly, undeniable.
But here is where a critical technicality rears its head. Despite this clear, documented string of medical visits all over the globe, when Manzano was finally sent back to Manila on December 3, 2010, his return was not classified as a medical repatriation. Nope, he was sent home simply because his standard 8-month contract had naturally expired. The company essentially just stamped his paperwork, end of contract, totally bypassing the medical reality of why he was really leaving.
Section 2. The Union Contract Dilemma.
Okay, so seeking compensation for his severe, ongoing pain, Manzano initially relied on a specific labor agreement he had signed. It was called the TCC-CBA, basically a union contract. But this presented a massive legal hurdle. You see, the union contract offered a very lucrative payout, up to $250,000, but it specifically required that the injury result from a proven accident. Contrast that with the standard government-mandated contract for overseas workers, the POEA-SH. That one offers a lower payout, but only requires a work-related illness. Manzano obviously aimed for the union contract, but the barrier to entry was significantly higher.
And that barrier basically comes down to how the law rigidly defines an accident. Drawing from legal dictionaries, the court defines it as a fortuitous circumstance event or happening without human agency, which is unusual and unexpected. Manzano claimed he slipped and fell and later got hit by a metal door, right? But here is the major problem. He couldn't legally prove those specific incidents actually happened. The ship's master submitted a statement saying absolutely no accident involving Manzano was ever recorded in the ship's logs. So without that hard proof, the Supreme Court had to completely dismiss his claim under that lucrative union contract.
Section 3. A legal change of course.
So, with the union contract off the table, the shipping company argued that since Manzano was sent home purely because his contract ended and not for medical reasons, they were completely shielded from liability. But the Supreme Court strongly disagreed. Actually, they pivoted. They shifted focus back to that standard employment contract, ruling that a seafarer repatriated for end of contract can absolutely still be entitled to disability benefits provided the illness is reasonably linked to the work. I mean, they basically said it was absurd to deny benefits to someone who clearly developed medical conditions while performing heavy labor on board just because of an end-of-contract stamp.
But wait, to qualify under this standard contract, Manzano had to follow some strict procedural steps to the letter. Step 1. Report to the company-designated physician within exactly 3 days of arriving in Manila. Step 2. Undergo diagnosis and treatment. And you know what? Manzano actually went to the company on day 2. Now, they initially just handed him a health card instead of actually examining him, but he persisted and got checked out shortly after. Eventually, he underwent an MRI, which confirmed some really severe issues: tendinosis, torn ligaments in his shoulder, and degenerative disc disease in his lower back. He followed the rules, and the medical evidence was officially locked in.
Section 4. The 2040-day ticking clock.
Now, despite undergoing months of physical therapy at St. Luke's Medical Center and even getting recommendations for knee and shoulder surgeries, a really strange thing happened. The company doctor never actually issued a final assessment on Manzano's fitness to return to sea, and by staying silent, they triggered a strict, unforgiving legal timer under the labor code. See, under the law, when a seafarer is being treated, their temporary total disability initially lasts for up to 120 days. If they need more treatment, that period can be extended, but, and this is absolutely crucial, the employer must declare the worker's final status within this window. They have to decide, is the worker fit to return or are they permanently disabled? They cannot just leave the worker in medical limbo indefinitely.
And that hard, absolute maximum deadline for the company-designated physician to make a decision, it is exactly 240 days. That's 240 days from the initial examination. The company doctor had 240 days to officially evaluate Manzano's physical state and make a definitive legal declaration about his livelihood.
Which exposes a massive legal trap for the employer. The rules are clear, the timelines are mandated, but what happens on day 241 if the company doctor simply fails to declare a final assessment by the end of that ticking clock? Does the seafarer just lose out entirely? Actually, no. Far from it. The law steps in to protect the worker from that endless uncertainty.
Section 5. The Supreme Court's verdict.
Because the company's physician stayed silent past that 240-day deadline without assessing his fitness for sea duty, the Supreme Court didn't even need to debate the medical nuances anymore. By operation of law, when that 240-day deadline is blown without a medical assessment, a temporary total disability legally transforms into a permanent and total disability. The employer's failure to evaluate him essentially handed the seafarer a default victory. Manzano was unable to work his usual job during that whole period, and the company's silence cemented his status as permanently disabled in the eyes of the Philippine justice system.
As a result, the Supreme Court awarded Manzano the absolute maximum disability benefit allowable under the standard employment contract. That amount is $60,000. Plus, because the company denied his valid claims and forced him into years of litigation just to protect his basic rights, the court also ordered the company to pay an extra 10% of the total in attorney's fees. It is a massive, massive financial consequence stemming directly from a single missed procedural deadline.
This entire case is a fascinating reminder that in the eyes of the law, procedure and strict adherence to timelines are often just as important as the facts of the dispute itself. The shipping company might have won the argument over the union contract and the whole definition of an accident, but they lost the war because they couldn't watch the clock. So it leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. If a single missed deadline by a company doctor can legally force an employer to pay out over $60,000, how secure and ironclad are the deadlines and loopholes in your own professional agreements? Are you tracking the vital timelines that can make or break your case? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll catch you next time.